Hello everyone, this is Jason from Primetime Aquatics, and in this video I wanted to answer a question that I saw on social media and I thought it was a good one. Someone asked, how can I make my fish grow as fast as possible? Now, we're not necessarily focused on making them grow as fast as possible in this video, but I do want to talk about how to maximize the growth of your fish in a healthy way. Hope you enjoy the video. Appreciate you being here. So the first thing I want to address, patience. In fact, we did a video on how to maximize your success in the fish keeping hobby. I'm going to put that in the upper right hand corner as well as in the description below, where we talk about some of the things that's going to help you be as successful as possible in the aquarium keeping hobby. And one of those things is having patience. And when it comes to watching your fish grow, enjoy the process. One of our favorite things to do in our fish room is watch fish that are born and watch them go through their entire life to the peak of their life, and then eventually they start to wind down towards the end. And that can be a very interesting thing to observe. And so my advice to you is, if you've got smaller fish, give them time to grow, enjoy the process. Now, that being said, we do want our fish to grow. We do want to maintain the maximum amount of healthy fish that we can. And so how do we do that? How do we make sure that they're growing appropriately? How do we make sure that they're growing at a healthy rate? First thing, obviously it comes down to fish feed. And so that's one of the things that you're going to want to do to maximize fish growth, is to make sure that you are feeding your fish, one, an appropriate diet, and two, that the foods that you're feeding contain a lot of nutrients that will allow your fish to grow and keep them healthy. If you feed them an inappropriate diet, so example, we have Mbuna cichlids in our fish room. I wouldn't load them up full of bloodworms. Now, bloodworms in many cases can help fish grow really fast, but for them, that is not a good diet for them to have, that super high protein diet. I could wind up not only not having them grow fast, but they could get sick and they could die. So we want to make sure that the foods we're feeding are high quality. We want to make sure that they are appropriate for the fish that we have. And one of the things that we have to think about, if we are trying to feed our fish too much food so that they grow more, that can lead to a number of problems. Yes, it can lead to unhealthy fish, but it can also lead to all kinds of water quality issues if you try to overfeed them and they don't eat all that food, or they're eating the food but now they're producing a lot of waste. And if we're not keeping up with our water changes, now our water quality goes down. That can actually stunt their growth, causes a lot of stress. But not only that, as the water quality is diminished, you introduce risk, and that risk can mean introducing disease into your tank. And of course, not only are you dealing with disease, that will also impact how fast your fish are going to grow when they're constantly fighting disease. Something else you may want to consider, if your fish are not growing as fast as that type of fish normally does, you may want to look at the possibility of having internal parasites. If your fish have internal parasites, even if you're giving them a good diet and you're providing them enough food, those internal parasites can be taking nutrients away from your fish. So if they're looking really skinny, they have a sunken belly, or maybe their belly is swollen, that might indicate internal parasites, and that's something you're going to want to research further and treat if necessary. All right, so we've dealt with the obvious thing, and that is the diet, but there are some other things that are super important beyond diet. One thing, make sure the stocking levels of your tank are appropriate. The more heavily stocked a tank, the more likely it is that you can have some fish that are stunted in their growth, either because they're not getting the nutrients or just because it's a crowded environment, and that can stunt the growth of your fish. I've saved the best for last, and possibly the most important thing, and that is make sure that you have an appropriately sized tank for the fish that you're keeping. If your fish are in a tank that is too small, that can and often will stunt their growth. That does not mean that fish will grow to the size of their tank, so you can go out and get a 12-inch ballast shark as a baby, just throw it in a 10-gallon and it will be fine. It's not what I'm saying at all. Even if you have stunted growth, you still have internal organs and other things that may grow faster than the outside of their body. You might start to see that they get some deformities in terms of their skeletal structure. It can be a real mess. I'm going to highlight for you a really good example. So we've had some Eureka red cichlids in our fish room. Some of our females were growing out in a 75-gallon tank, and so they were allowed to grow to their full size. But I had a few that were growing out in a 10-gallon tank, and I made the mistake of leaving them in there a little bit too long because I was still trying to move fish around in our fish room. And so some of these females wound up in this 10-gallon tank a little longer than I would have liked. And then I put them all in a 55-gallon. And you can see here that the larger females, clearly they were grown in a tank more appropriate for their size, but these smaller ones are about the same age, but they spent too much time in that 10-gallon. Again, that's a mistake that I made by leaving them in there too long. And now you can see the difference between the two. And this doesn't just happen with Eureka red cichlids. This can happen with a lot of fish. Fish will grow slower in a smaller tank. That doesn't mean they won't outgrow the tank, because they will. It doesn't mean you're not going to have problems with stunting their growth, serious health problems, because you can. But make sure your tank is an appropriate size. So if you know you're going to be keeping a 12-inch ballast shark or tinfoil barbs, you're like, oh, okay, it'll be fine in this 29-gallon for a while. Yeah, the growth is going to be slower, but it's not okay. These fish are being harmed by this small tank. They would be much better off in that 6 or really even 8-foot tank to make sure that they're growing at an appropriate size over an appropriate amount of time. So the bottom line is this: if you want your fish to grow to their full potential, make sure their diet's good, feed them an appropriate amount of food, make sure your water quality is awesome, and make sure you've got a tank that is appropriate for their adult size. I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, share, subscribe, and we'll see you in the next one.